I enjoy my time with him, don't you? Now I want to ask you something, and thank you, young lady, for that reminder that we need to spend time. I believe in the Bible and also believe in the inspired commentary from the inspired commentator, the writings of Ellen G. White. It's commentary on the Bible. And the inspired commentator tells us if we find time and voice to pray, this is my life today. She says, God will find God will find voice and time to answer. I miss the time with him if I skip. And you know, something I've learned about the devil, he watches us. And if you dare to get out of your bed and do your routine and get on the street and you haven't prayed, the devil knows it. And you know that's his opportunity to take you out. He knows. So don't miss your time with him. Well, today, I want to, my theme first. My theme, I hope I've got this right. Gentlemen, I think somebody's going to have to help me. Oh, I think I got it. Yeah, there it is. If you have your Bibles, would you stand with me? Mark. Our scripture today was Luke 8, but we're going to read it from one of the other gospel writers, Mark, the 5th chapter. And we can read it together. Mark 5, beginning with verse 25, and we're going through verse 31. Mark 5, verse 25 through 31. I'm reading from the New King James Version. You may read from whatever version you have, but we read it together, verse 25 together. Now, a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years and had suffered many things from many physicians. She had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, if only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well. Immediately the fountain was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction. And verse 30, Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that power had gone out of him, turned around in the crowd and said, who touched my clothes? Let's read verse 33 too. But his disciples said to him, you see the multitude thronging you, and you say, who touched me? Through the crowd to Jesus, Father, speak to us through your word. Help us not to miss what you're telling us, what you're showing us. Help us to experience it, not just to listen, not just to tell it, but to feel it and to experience. In the name of Jesus Christ, we ask, amen. Through the crowd to Jesus. Well, I've made a few notes and I want to share them with you. In Luke 8, I go back to Luke 8, when this woman reached out and touched him, Jesus said, I have it right here. I'm going to probably have to have, yeah, there it is. I got it now. I think I got it, John. Jesus said, who touched me? Now she reached out and touched the hem of his garment. Who touched me? He felt it. And then Jesus went on to say, when the disciples came to him and they said, but Master, you see this crowd thronging you? One version says, crushing you. This crowd is so much of a crowd, they're crushing you. And you're saying, somebody touched me? Now, here's what I want you to see. Jesus elevated this woman. This woman had been sick for 12 years. And because of her sickness, the flow of blood, it made her what they termed at that time unclean. She was persona non grata, unwelcome in the church. She couldn't come to church because of the flow of blood. She was unwelcome in the community. Persona non grata. She was a nobody and a nothing in the crowd. You and I are nothing and nobody too until you come in touch with Jesus. But Jesus, you see, we are nothing and nobody despite our degrees, despite your bank account, despite your Mercedes or BMW or Ford or Chevy, despite your clothes you wear, despite your press clippings, until you connect with Jesus, you're still a nobody. It was then when she touched him, Jesus called her somebody. From nobody to somebody. And he made her tell everybody. Now here, look at this. The crowd didn't even know she was there. And they could care less that she was there. Even if she dropped out, they didn't care. She wouldn't be noticed or missed. She could come to a church like this, and you wouldn't even know she was there. But you might know she's here because we got some empty pews. That's going to change. Church is going to fill up before this journey is over. Not going to be room in this church. But let me move on. That's another message. She was not the crowd's priority. Not anybody's concern. Her status was unnoticed. She had no credentials, no qualifications. She was unqualified and even disqualified. This was a nobody. Despite your degrees or affluence, despite your position, put yourself in her shoes. A nobody. Even though if you come from a prestigious family, she's still a nobody. Even if you have degrees, you're still a nobody. But get in touch with Jesus. And nobody becomes what he calls somebody. Amen. I want to be somebody, don't you? Amen. And I earned a bachelor's from through Oakwood and Union, and a master's at the Andrews University, and finally earned my PhD. But still, nobody outside of Jesus. And it still happens today that nobody, I know of people, I know of a drunk man that touched Jesus. And now he became first elder in the church. I know of a man who was a kingpin, mafia boss in Pittsburgh, who got in touch with Jesus. Someday I'll tell you how it happened. He was head of the black mafia, kingpin, and somehow got in touch with Jesus. Became the head deacon. When you get in touch with Jesus. Now it says, the story says, this woman had suffered. She had spent all her money. She was bankrupt. Bankrupt. Spent all her money on physicians. And Mark says that her condition had gotten worse. She suffered. When she went to the doctor, they tortured her. Back in those days, the medical profession was atrocious. For example, here's what they did. If you had appendicitis, I think it's on this side, isn't it? Right side, isn't it? Any medical people here? Appendix on this side, isn't it? You had appendicitis back then, you know what they did? They beat on it. They beat on it. No wonder the woman got worse. Spent all her money. And you know, some of the medications that they concocted, they took flies, they took rats, and they mixed the potion up, and then fed that to you. That'll kill you. If it doesn't heal you, you're going to... Now, I don't mind you saying amen. You can say amen. But here's the point, or have mercy, that's it. She suffered, the Bible, Mark says, until she decided she heard about Jesus. She heard that so she attempted to reach him many times. Read Desire of Ages. Many times she tried to reach him, couldn't reach him, because of always around Jesus, there was a crowd. Everywhere he went, Mark says the crowd formed it, choked it. There were so many people, he could hardly move. Well, woman said to herself, I need, what do they call it when you go to see the doctor? An interview? What do you call it? Appointment, an interview, a diagnosis, checkup. In other words, the doctor's first thing he's going to say, what's wrong? But every time she attempted to reach him, there was a crowd. She couldn't reach him. So no interview, no appointment, no diagnosis. So she made up in her mind, well, all that I've heard about Jesus, if I can just touch the hem of his garment. But you see, there's something about touch. I want you to see something about touch. Do you know, the scientists say that we touch our phones, average person, 2,617 times a day. That's talking about swipes. Every time you touch your phone, one way or the other, 2,600 times a day. But the excessive people, the heaviest smartphone users, click, tap, or swipe 5,477 times a day. Now, you may think it's, that's just a phone. Touch! Different ways you touch it. You know what it makes me think of? Back when I was growing up in the old-fashioned Adventist church, we used to sing, call him up! Yes. Call him up! sing, within your bosom, you have a home. Well, we need to get back to those old songs. I want to see some musicians like this, brother. Give me your name, sir. Chris. To take some of those old songs, retool, put them with some modern sound. Take the words, touch. If I can just get in touch with it. You could get in touch with Jesus. Well, anyhow, see, 6,000 times a day, that's touch. But now, let's look at the power of touch. Did you know, I'm into sports. Any young people here? We don't have any young people here? They all gone? We got a few here. You know anything about the NFL? Young people, raise your hand if you know something. You don't know anything about the NFL? Raise your hand if you know something about it. You know something about the NBA? Some of the ladies know. NBA playoffs going right now. Okay, you know what they do when they say, here's what Dr. Dasher Kellner talked about, professor of psychology, talked about touch. He's concluded that touch lowers stress, builds morale, produces triumph, a chest bump, a high five, a half hug. You know where they jump into each other? That's touch. I don't want you to see the power of touch. Another doctor, Sidney Gerard, sat in coffee shops around the world. He counted the times he saw one person touch another. And of course, you know, the scientists, the medical science says, the psychologists say, for maximum mental, physical, spiritual, and social health, maximum. I want that, maximum, don't you? Anybody here want the maximum? Mental, want your mind to be functioning, maximum, physical, social, spiritual health. You need 6 hugs every day. Now, hugging is in trouble today with, you know, all the stuff. You know, you hug a woman. I try to hug the little children and the elderly ladies. And if I hug the young women, and my wife taught me to hug, because I used to didn't hug. But my late wife taught me to hug everybody. So when I hug the attractive women, it's going to be on the side. I'm going to hug them sideways. I don't want no mess up, no misunderstanding. Well, anyhow, here's what he said about touching. Dr. Gerard says, Puerto Rico, around the world. In Puerto Rico, he counted people touched 180 touches in an hour. That's a lot of touching. In France, 110 touches in an hour. In the United States, he observed in the coffee shop, people touched only twice in an hour. Wow. Something's going wrong here. We're talking about the power of touch. And London, England did worse. In a whole hour, no touches, 0. Wow. Now here's the thing about the power of touch. Waitresses, Dr. Gerard says, who touch patrons, just a little touch, receive a larger tip than those who don't. Talking about the power of touch. In athletics, the winners of the NBA playoffs, the winners, they're going to chest bump, they're going to high five. The winners are touched 6 times more than the losers. there's more. I mentioned about 6 hugs a day. Mentioned that already. All right, I'm talking about the power of touch. Well, this woman decided, if I can just touch the hem of his garment, I'll be made whole. If I can just touch him. But now, there's a problem here with touch. You see, the hem of every male, he had, I forget what you call it, but those little pomegranates and the little strings were symbols of the 10 Commandments. So when you touched the hem of the garment, you were really touching the commandments. But if you read the Bible in the Old Testament, you touch the ark, the 10 Commandments, you're dead. Uzzah reached out and touched that ark, dead. But this is not the ark. This is the Creator, the God himself. So she's taking a risk. If I can just touch the hem of his garment. And so she reaches out. She reaches out in the crowd. Now, here's the thing about it. There's a crowd, always a crowd following Jesus. There's always a crowd. I may have missed one. I think I did. No, I didn't. I must have cut it out. Anyhow, there's always a crowd of people around Jesus, outside the church, in the church. And if you're ever going to get in touch with Jesus, don't miss this point, you're going to have to determine, I'm going through the crowd. Because there's a crowd always around Jesus, and they're always not right. Not always right. There's a crowd of, well, let's look at it. Let's look at these crowds. The first crowd is the worldly crowd. Worldly people. And the Bible says in James 4 that anybody who loves the world is an enemy of God. There's a worldly crowd. And I think the man who grew up in the church, but he left the church. And so a lot of his family, friends, they would come and say, come on to church, come on back to church. And he would always say, when I get my life straightened out, when I get straightened out, I'm coming. He never showed up, never came. But something happened and must have had an accident or something, and he was gone. Well, the family decided they're going to have the funeral, have it at the church. You know what? Somebody stood up and said, when they stood over him, they said, he said, when I get straightened out. There's a worldly crowd. If you're going to get in touch with Jesus, you're going to have to press through the crowd. There's another crowd called the well, let's look at this crowd. This is the gossiping and lying crowd. But now, there's another crowd I want to get to before them. A spectator crowd. The spectators, there are 4 or 5 kinds of people, 5 kinds of spectators. Now, here's the thing about this that bothers me. The inspired commentary says that there is a paralysis upon the people of God. That a stupor, a death stupor from Satan. If you read Judges 5:16, talks about Reuben and also Meraz. Curse ye Meraz, because he didn't come to the help of the Lord against the mighty. And Reuben had great searchings of heart. He had motives. He had ideas. He things he wanted to do, but he never did it. Never moved. So there are 5 kinds of people. There are people who are waiting on something to happen. There's always a crowd of people. A lot of them join the church. They're waiting on something to happen before they'll make any change, any move. The second kind of person that you'll run into are people who are watching everything that happens. They watch. Come and go. They're just watching. There's a third kind, And you've heard this before. There are some people that make things happen. I like those people. They make things happen. But then there's a fourth person who wonders what happened. Don't know what happened. They watched, they waited, and they don't know what happened. But there's a fifth kind. Now, you've heard about the four kinds, but I'm going to tell you that I found that there's a fifth kind. In other words, there are people that wait, that wonder, there are people that watch, there are people that make things happen, but there are some people whose aim and determination is to see that nothing happens. Well, but here we have the gossiping and lying crowd. James, they set their mouth against the heavens. Their tongue walks through the earth. The tongue is a fire, world of iniquity, set on fire by hell. Do you know Proverbs 19:21 says, there is life and death in the power of the tongue. Yes. There's a lying, gossiping, criticizing, condemning, cruel people with their tongue. Now, there are two ways to get through a crowd of liars and gossips and criticizers. Only two ways. The first way, this may come as a shock to you, if you can just make it to next February. Research says that gossips and liars, that for some reason, February, they don't do that gossiping and lying. February. So if you can make it to February, I guess that's what they're talking about, people up north, because it's cold and it's snow. They got time to get out there. But make it fit. That's the first way. But the second way is don't chase every rumor down, everything that people say about you. If you try to chase it down and track down who said it and where did it start, you only make it worse. Now, the inspired commentator says this, my favorite Bible commentator and commentary. It says that she pictured it like this. I saw the people of God in their white robes marching. We're marching to Zion. They're marching to Zion. And she saw these gossips and liars and satanic instruments taking black balls and throwing the black balls at them at their white robes. Black, muddy, and gossips they can tell some muddy stuff. Yes. And you think that's just in the world? You think the lying is just up there in D.C.? And you know where in D.C. I'm talking about? You think it's just lying there? Sometimes the lying gets in the church. Yes. And black balls. And if you, now the inspired commentary said, if you stop to pick the black balls up and throw them back, you get your garment stained. But if you ignore the black balls and just keep on marching, keep on going, the black balls fall harmless, or as Paul put it in Ephesians 6, put on the whole armor of God. And he says, if you got on the whole armor of God and the shield of faith, will quench all the fiery darts of Satan. Yes. You got to go through that crowd to Jesus. Yes, here's the crowd. I wish you could see it. I can't point it out, but see this guy on the end here? You got a crowd of people like in the church. This man is saying, remember how much money I give each week. You got to press through that stuff. And here's a woman back here saying, make sure there are enough programs for my kids. Tell me how much God wants to bless me. See that, brother? And this brother here, he says, please refer to sin as bad choices. And of course, he got his nose pierced. He's got his mouth pierced. He made some bad choices. And he's got his weed and all that stuff. You got to get through the crowd. I'm not going to waste more time with that. But if you ignore those black balls and keep going, then. But that's a gospel language. There's another crowd, though I can't, before I get to the cross. Let me go back here. There's a rebellious crowd. Some rebels are even in the church. Rebels. Now, this is very serious. Research says in every crowd of 100, we don't have 100 here, I don't believe. I don't know what the membership is, but in every crowd of 100 people, research says 5 in any crowd of 100 people are psychopaths. Are you listening to me? Yes. Psychopaths. Yes. 5. You don't know who they are. Now, you know what a psychopath is. That's a guy can kill you. And you know, I had a member in the church, one of my churches. I've had so many churches. But this brother, the member said, he's the kind of brother, if he sees you fall down, you better start singing, "We Get Up." If you don't start singing, "We Get Up," and start moving, this brother will come by you, see you falling down. He ain't gonna help you. He's gonna walk past you, look at you. And then if you don't get up, he's gonna come back and kick you. And then spit on you. That's a psychopath. No conscience. No guilt. He can kill you and don't feel nothing about it. Psychopath, 5 in every 100. Now, you better think about that when you go to camp meeting and you go to a general conference or any kind of big meeting where you got over 100, you got thousands of people. How many psychopaths are there? On top of that, what the Lord reminded me today, and I know I'm talking to somebody, because not everybody's a psychopath. Some are sociopaths. And the research doesn't tell you how many sociopaths are there, but 5 are psychopaths. You know, a sociopath, the difference is a psychopath will stomp you and kick you and kill you and have no conscience. But a sociopath, he's going to stomp you and kick you and spit on you and walk away, then he's going to feel sorry about it. That's a sociopath. Well, how many sociopaths, we don't know. But you got to go through that crowd if you want to get to Jesus. And then here's this rebellious crowd. That's what I'm talking about. Rebels. Now you see, every one of us, Lord help me. I know I'm talking to somebody, and I don't know who, because, the Lord brought to me this morning as I was going over my notes, how in the Great Controversy says that when the minister prepares his sermon, that the devil looks over his shoulder, sees what he's going to preach about, and then he goes to work to make sure that some people don't come who should get it. And some people come with the wrong spirit, but they won't get it. And so the devil does that. So, in other words, he works on some people before they come to any big meeting. We're talking about the psychopaths and sociopaths again. If you don't, here's what the Pen of Inspiration says. If you don't, before you come to church, before you step out of your house and you're on your way to church, if you don't humble yourself before God, and ask him to empty me of self and fill me with your spirit? When I go to church, let it be not I, but Christ. If you don't do that, the inspired commentary says you bring the devil with you in your attitude. You bring an atmosphere of rebellion. Now, I know I'm not talking to Bethlehem. You don't have no rebellion. You've never had any angry board meetings, angry disputes at business meetings. I know you don't have that here. I see. But there's an atmosphere that we bring with us, an atmosphere that can be positive or negative, can be faith-filled or rebellious. Every one of us bring an atmosphere, one or the other. One or the other. Well, anyhow, and this atmosphere, sometimes it breaks up churches, families, disrupts with squabbles and pettiness. Some people come they bring a chip on their shoulder. That's the way they come. They got that atmosphere. I think of the two men were waiting at a bus stop. They're waiting at this bus stop, and the dog was just sitting there next to one man, and the other man said, "That's a nice dog. He's nice. Does he bite?" The man said, "No, my dog doesn't bite." He said, "You sure your dog doesn't bite?" "No, my dog doesn't bite." So the man reached over and started petting the dog. That dog jumped up and tore his pants and grabbed him and growled and chewed. And when that dog got through the man, his pant leg was half gone. And finally the bus came, and the man said, the dog left him alone. The man said, "I thought you said my dog doesn't bite." He said, "That's not my dog." Everybody in the church, just because they're in the church. I used to get mad when my little nephew was talking about my niece. This is a nephew in California, met a niece in Alabama at Huntsville. And he said, "Oh, Dell is my dog. That's my dog." I got mad. Don't call my niece a dog. Well, now I understand. I finally got what they meant. But the man was saying, "That's not my dog." Well, finally, there's another crowd. There's a hypocritical crowd. If you're going to get to Jesus, you see, what I'm trying to say is I learned the hard way. I don't go to church. I like you. I like this church the minute I stepped in here. Met some friendly people. I like you. I like the church where I attend regularly. I like the churches. But I don't go to church for the people. The fellowship is all right. That's good. The fellowship is good. But the reason I should go to church is for him, not people. So if you don't act right, I'm not going to stop going to church because I'm coming to meet him. If you act right, that just adds cherry on top of my ice cream. But it's for him, not the people. And if you act right, that makes it good, makes it better. But it's always good with the Lord. So here's the point, though. There's a lot of hypocrisy. If you allow, the hypocrites will block your contact and your touch with Jesus. They will block your way. They will keep you from a genuine relationship with Christ. They will keep you. A hypocrite, if you let him, if you allow a hypocrite And some of the hypocritical things they do and say, if you permit, they will block you from getting your blessing. Amen. Some people quit going to church because there's so many hypocrites there. Some people lose their blessing. You know, there was a revivalist that they decided they're going to have a revival. And they're going to bring in this man who always guaranteed to pack the house because he had a talking horse. So they advertised it, and sure enough, the house was packed. Well, the horse didn't really talk, but he communicated. So better to say a communicating horse. Well, so the program got started, brought the horse on up, and they said, how many are the commandments of God? So the horse tapped it out. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. How many apostles did Jesus have? 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Beatitudes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. How many fruits of the Spirit? 6, 7, 8, 9. Everybody was amazed at this talking horse. How many hypocrites in this church? That horse went to dance. They say that horse will be dancing from now until Jesus comes. Well, I must close. Some crowds in the church will block your view if you let them. But don't let them block. Don't let them block your view of Jesus Christ. That's why he went to Calvary. He went to Calvary and shed his blood. And he's coming back in our generation. He's coming soon. And I want to be ready. So here's the point that I want you to leave here with today. That Jesus is more than enough. Jesus, when she got in touch with him, she got in touch with, well, let me put it this way. Modern medical science, there are at least 13 different departments of medical science or of medical healing, at least 13 that I know of. 13 different schools of medicine. And here you're looking at some of them. Healthcare. 13 different schools of medicine. Psychiatry. Jesus once took a man whose mind was gone. They asked, what's your name? He said, Legion. 5,000 people had his mind. Jesus cleared his mind. That's a school of medicine, psychiatry. OBGYN. Jesus said, you must be born again. X-ray. Revelation says that he has eyes like fire. And you see, the X-ray can see through what's in you. It sees through. But Jesus not only can see through you, but he can see you through. Somebody ought to say amen to that. Orthopedics, limbs, bones. Jesus put hands and feet, limbs and bones together. Chiropractor, limbs, bones, hands, feet. Oncology, leprosy, cancer, AIDS. He touched them. They touched him and were healed. Surgery. He took Adam, put him to sleep. I'm talking about Jesus had all the medical departments. He got it all. Just in Jesus. Put Adam to sleep. Opened up his rib and created Eve. That's surgery. And then cardiology. He says, I will give you a new heart. Neurology, skin, nerves. Lepers were healed. But there are two departments that Jesus has that modern medical science and medical healing, any school of medicine doesn't have. They have those 12 departments. But there are two departments that Dr. Jesus has. A resurrection department and a translation department. Yes, it's through the crowd to Jesus. Well, I don't know about you, but you see, you can touch the hem of his garment. But that's the church. That's the hem. That's the commandments. But Jesus said, who touched me? I don't want to just touch AY. That's a him. A board meeting, business meeting, a position, an elder, deacons. That's the hem of his garment. Touch me. That's the question. Who touched me? I don't know about you, but today, Lord, I want to touch you. I have two young ladies that are going to help me go home, help us go home with this. Who touched me? Who touched me?